right, so you wanted to know more about critical thinking, huh? Like how to actually do it, not just what it is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We found this piece that really digs in. I think you'll find it interesting.
Oh, good.
One thing that stood out to me was how they emphasize that this isn't just for like academics or something.
Hmm.
It's a skill literally anyone can use to just make better choices.
Mm-hmm.
Big or small, doesn't matter.
Yeah, the source frames it as a process, something you work on, not like you either have critical thinking or you don't.
Totally.
Yeah.
And they start off by talking about, I'm sure we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
You make a decision, and then instantly it's like, oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it was impulsive or, you didn't have all the info,
Yeah.
or you just made the wrong assumptions, basically.
Yeah.
Like,
I've been there.
like that time I bought that super expensive gadget
Yeah.
that's still in the box.
Oh, I feel that.
The source breaks critical thinking down into 3 parts. Asking questions, analyzing information, and then considering different perspectives. But it goes deeper than that, right?
Right. It explains what each of those actually means.
Okay, so asking questions. Seems simple enough, right? But I'm guessing it's got to be more than just whatever pops into your head.
Oh, yeah. It's about asking the right questions. A critical thinker doesn't just take things at face value. They dig deeper, like clarifying questions to make sure they understand correctly, probing questions to get at assumptions or maybe even biases. They'll even ask questions to test if the information's even true, valid.
So not just any question will do, it's strategic.
Exactly.
What about the analyzing information part? That feels like it can get tricky, especially now when we're just flooded with information all the time.
It's true. The source talks about that information overload. And it really emphasizes that you have to analyze carefully, like how credible are your sources? Is the data even accurate, complete? Could there be manipulation going on?
It makes me think of those headlines, especially online. They try to grab you, but they don't always tell the whole story.
Oh, for sure. A critical thinker is going to look at a headline like that with, like, a healthy bit of skepticism. Okay, who's saying this? Are they known for being accurate? Does the headline even match the actual article? And is anyone else reporting this?
It's almost like you're a detective, right?
Right.
You got to look for clues and put it all together.
That's a good way to put it. And the source gives some tips for getting better at that, like how to spot those common tricks they use to twist information or logical fallacies, things like that.
So part of this everyday superpower thing is just being aware of all the info coming at you and then being choosy about what you believe.
Exactly.
Okay, and then the third part was considering other perspectives.
I know that can be hard.
Especially when it's something you feel strongly about.
Yeah.
But the source makes it clear this isn't about being right or wrong. It's about being open, even to stuff that challenges what you believe.
Because there are often multiple sides to things. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it might be that your perspective, maybe it's missing something or even wrong. And this seems really important when you're working with others.
Definitely. The source says to actually seek out different viewpoints. Like, talk to people who disagree with you. Be respectful, but listen to them. You never know, you might learn something.
Okay, so we've got our 3 parts. Good questions, analyzing well, and being open to other ideas. But then they talk about why this is sometimes so hard to do.
Yeah.
And it's not because people aren't smart enough, right? It's like there are these obstacles in our way. They mention information overload, which makes sense. It's hard to sift through it all. What else do they say?
It's not just the amount of information, though. Our own brains kind of mess with us, too. They talk about these things called cognitive biases. It's like our minds take shortcuts to make things easier, but those shortcuts can lead us to the wrong conclusions.
Cognitive biases, huh? That sounds kind of intense. Like, how would that affect my thinking?
Okay, so there's this thing called confirmation bias, right? It's this tendency we have to, like, favor information that already agrees with what we think, even if the information isn't that great, We'll gravitate towards sources that say what we want to hear, and then stuff that contradicts us, we'll just dismiss it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like when you're on social media, you kind of only click on the stuff you already agree with.
Exactly. And that's just one bias. There's this other one, availability bias, where we think things are more likely to happen just because we can think of an example easily. So, like, if something is really vivid in your memory or it was emotional, we tend to think it happens more often than it actually does.
Oh, right. So, like, if there's a really dramatic news story about something rare, we might start thinking it's happening all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got these biases messing with us. And then we also tend to just rely on assumptions. We
Yeah.
accept stuff without questioning it, especially if it fits in with what we already believe.
It's like our own brains are working against us when it comes to critical thinking. So does the source give us any hope? Like, can we get better at this?
They do. The good news is critical thinking, it's a skill. You can practice and get better. Doesn't mean you'll be perfect, obviously. Right.
But you can learn to be more aware of how you're thinking, and that helps a lot.
So where do we start?
Well, first, they say it's crucial to just pause before you react to something,
Okay.
especially if it's emotional or it's complicated information. Just take a breath,
Yeah.
step back, and then really look at the situation.
Pause and reflect. Got it. What then?
Then you can start asking those critical questions, like,
Mm.
who's giving me this information? Why are they telling me this? What proof do they have? Is there another way to look at this? A different explanation I haven't thought of.
So slow down. Be skeptical.
Yeah, not like assume everything's a lie, but be willing to dig a little.
Okay.
And a big part of that is seeking out different perspectives, like we talked about before.
Mm.
It's so easy to stay in our own little bubble, surrounded by people who think just like us. But if you want to get better at this, you got to break out of that.
I can see how that would be hard.
It can be uncomfortable, sure.
Yeah.
Especially if you run into opinions that clash with yours, stuff you feel really strongly about.
But the source makes a good point. It's in those moments when you're uncomfortable, that's when you really learn and grow. So try to approach it with curiosity, not like you're trying to defend your position. It's not about winning.
It's about understanding.
Exactly. And maybe realizing you were wrong about something, which can be tough, but
But good, ultimately. So this is all making sense, but do they give us any real-life examples? Like, how do we actually use this stuff day to day?
yeah, they do. They use a few different scenarios. One is like evaluating information online, which we all do that constantly, right?
Oh, tell me about it. Every time I open social media, it's just an avalanche of opinions and stories.
Right. So how do you sift through all that? The source uses this example of like a viral post about some miracle cure.
Okay.
Instead of just taking it at face value or sharing it right away, a critical thinker would stop and think. Like, where does info come from? Is this a legitimate medical source or just some random blog? Do any other trustworthy sources say the same thing? Is the language over the top, trying to get an emotional reaction?
So look past the clickbait, basically, and really dig into it.
Right. Think of yourself as a fact checker, not just someone who absorbs whatever they see. Especially when it comes to stuff that's important, like health, finances, things like that. Misinformation can be dangerous.
That's a good point. What other examples do they give?
Well, they talk about using critical thinking for big purchases, like you're buying a house or a car.
Oh, yeah. Big decisions.
Exactly. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement, but you got to think about the practical stuff too.
Oh, like that time I almost bought that super fancy espresso machine, even though I never make coffee at home.
Yeah.
It just looks so cool. But a little critical thinking would have saved me some money, for sure.
Perfect example. A critical thinker would be like, do I need this? Will I actually use it? Can I afford it? Are there any downsides?
It's not just about what you want, but what makes sense in the long run.
Right. And then another area they talk about is conflict resolution. Disagreements happen all the time with family, friends, coworkers, even strangers online.
Oh, yeah. And those can get messy fast.
For sure. So the source says, bring those critical thinking skills into the argument. Don't just get defensive or try to prove the other person wrong.
Hmm.
Listen to them. Really try to see their point of view.
So the goal isn't to win the argument. It's to find a solution that works for everyone.
Exactly. And that might mean compromising, thinking of new options, even admitting you were wrong about something.
It sounds like critical thinking isn't just about information and decisions. It's about communicating better, having stronger relationships.
That's a really good point. And the source emphasizes that, how it all ties together. It's not just a set of rules, it's a whole way of thinking. Approaching everything with curiosity, being open-minded, wanting to understand.
It's questioning what you think you know, looking for evidence, and challenging yourself.
Yeah. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. You start seeing patterns, spotting those inconsistencies, and you get better at judging information.
Like building a mental filter.
Exactly. But I did wonder, is there a downside to this? Like, does it make you too skeptical of everything? Does it suck the fun out of life?
Right. Good question.
Well, the source actually talks about that. They say it's not about becoming some cynical person who doesn't trust anything. It's finding that balance.
Skeptical, but still open to new ideas.
Right. And they point out all the good things that come from being a better critical thinker.
Like what?
Well, For one, you're less likely to fall for those manipulative tactics or bad arguments, emotional appeals.
Mhm.
You become more independent because you know you can figure things out for yourself.
It's empowering.
It is, and it makes you more resilient too. When stuff goes wrong, you're better at analyzing the situation and finding a solution.
Like having a problem-solving toolkit in your brain.
Exactly. And here's something I thought was cool. They say critical thinking can actually make you more creative.
Wait, really? How?
Because when you question everything and look at things from different angles, you come up with new ideas.
Ah, so it's not just about analyzing, it's about imagining too.
Right. And the source reminds us this isn't something you do alone. Talk to people, get those different viewpoints, and don't be afraid to challenge each other. Respectfully, of course.
So even conversations can be like critical thinking practice.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. We're all still learning how to do this. The important thing is to be curious, be willing to learn, and just approach everything with a more thoughtful, careful mindset.
Well said. And that reminds me, the source ends with this challenge, right? They want us to actually try this out.
Yeah. They say to think about an assumption you made recently, something you probably didn't even realize you were assuming.
Such a simple idea, but it's powerful. Anyone can do it.
Totally. And it proves that critical thinking isn't just some abstract concept, it's something you can use.
So, to our listener, we challenge you to do the same. Think back on your day. What's something you just assumed was true? Now, put it to the test. Ask those critical questions. Try to see it from other perspectives. You might be surprised where you end up.
You might be surprised what you discover. And remember, it's not about being right all the time. It's about being curious and always wanting to learn more.
That's a great way to put it. And on that note, we'll leave you to think about that assumption. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it was interesting, maybe even made you think a little. And until next time, keep those minds sharp.